Now then, lads, and welcome back. It's been a bit of a while, I know, but today I'm going to be giving my thoughts on the recent Forrest Shadows update. And at least this is only a couple weeks later instead of months, like the Burma one, so that's something, right? That is called improvement, chaps, and I think that's good. Anyway, so yeah, let's have a look at this update, because oh boy do I have some, let's just say, opinions on this update. But first, what actually are the main features of the update? Well, there's 6 new tech tree unlocks. There's the Jagdpanther for the Germans, the M36 GMC for the Yanks, the AVT-40 with a 20-round magazine for the Soviets, and Japan got 3 new toys, an M2 carbine sawn-off, and 2 new fighters, with one that has rockets. Hey, that's something. There's also the brand new map Wold added to the Battle of Berlin, the minus 20% XP desertion penalty, and a new map Select feature, which, yeah, we'll get to. Anyway, so let's jump straight into this. We'll start with the weapons in no real particular order. So, let's start with the M36 GMC, which, at least in my opinion, is kind of the definition of mid. It's a new Tier 4 American tank destroyer that's basically an upgraded Wolverine with a 90mm cannon. You even get some APCR with it, which is pretty nice. But overall, I don't really have much to say about it, since, well, it is just a high-tier open-top tank destroyer for the Allies, and many people who have used these can probably, say that they're not exactly the best, considering what they're fighting. I mean, I don't think it's going to be used much, mainly due to the problem that it's quite easy to kill. Even when grey zone camping, I mean, you can kill this with a single round of HE from one of the Tigers or a Panther. And if I'm being honest, this feels more like they kind of had to give the Allies something, so this is just a War Thunder port. I mean, it's probably been in the files for ages, like most War Thunder vehicles, but still. I mean, to be fair, I've not used this one as much as I've used other weapons that came out in this update, so I can't really attest to how brilliant it is, but from what I did see, I think I saw most of how it would be. It's just another tech tree filler rather than something interesting like a cool British tank. I mean, how cool would it have been if they'd added the Comet or something, but oh well. Honestly, M36 GMC, I guess it's nice you hear, but I don't think this thing's going to be used a lot. Continuing the trend of tank destroyers, the Germans now have the Jagdpanther again. Now, this one isn't the same as the premium one. From what I understand, this one is the command variant, and also comes with less ammunition. But it is still nice to see this added. Unlike the M36 GMC, this felt a lot better, mainly because it had armour, but still, bunch of armour, the 88mm, what's not to like? I enjoyed the Jagdpanther quite a bit, and I will be honest, it's pretty decent, but it still suffers from the main problems of the German tank destroyers. That being no easy way to deal with close infantry in an infantry fighting game, or the ability to change your target on a whim as easily as, say, the M36. Other than that, the main issue though, at least in my opinion, is that this thing is really only fun on defense, and really only fun if you like grey zoning. Like, it's cool that it's useful as a tank on defense, but it's still, it's grey zoning. I don't want to play like a pussy. Although, I will admit, I think having this thing in Tier 5 is a bit too much, and I think the rating is probably mostly down to the armour. I mean, I don't think there's a huge problem putting it in Tier 4. I mean, the Tiger H1 is in Tier 4, and that has the 88mm. But, the armor's not as good, so it is what it is. Although a nice tank, I think it is pretty cool, but it is unlocked a little bit too late, at least in my opinion. But hey, at least it's not a waste of space. Next is the Soviet AVT-40-20. So, for a bit of background info, originally this was meant to be a silenced Papushka 41, but after the update tests and quite a bit of community backlash, which is rightfully so, in my opinion, it was changed to the AVT 4020, which I do think is absolutely the right idea. I mean, it would have been very weird having a silenced weapon in the tech tree, and this is a gun that I think will finally make the Soviet battle rifles somewhat competent. So, what actually is the AVT 4020 like, though? Well, I mean, have you used the AVT 40 before? Because if you have, congratulations, you've used the AVT 4020. It's literally the exact same rifle, but you have 10 extra rounds in a magazine. I mean, it's nice, it does balance out the ammunition problem compared to the FG42, but it is still just an AVT-40, so it's still got quite a bit of visual recoil, and I don't know, I'm not the biggest fan of the gun. I don't hate it, but it just feels weird to use. I can't really put my finger on why, but yeah, no, I mean, this is a nice inclusion. I'm glad this is what we got over what we could have had. I just think there's not a lot to really say about it without talking about the AVT-40 in general. Anyway, let's get to the next gun, which, oh boy, am I dreading. Okay, here we go. The M2 carbine sawn-off is really fucking stupid. Okay, before we get into the gun in Enlisted, I have to explain this, because this gun sent me down a rabbit hole, which is the main reason why this video took as long as it took to make. Alright, so this gun originates from this picture. It seems to show US Marine comparing a regular M1 carbine to a captured M1 carbine that's been modified by the fact that it's been, you know, sawn down. It appears to have the barrel shortened and the stock cut off, which would imply that this was being used as a PDW or SMG. Now, I first saw this picture on the Enlisted English forums, posted under the weapon announcement post when this initially came out. Now, however, I was skeptical. This seemed to me quite much like a one-off, much more than the other guns. So, I decided to actually do some research into the history of this gun to find out what it was. Right, so I started by reverse image searching the picture, which overwhelmingly came up with this. A Reddit post on r/Forgotten Weapons. Now, luckily, the OP posted a bit about the image, mentioning that A, this picture was from the Battle of Peleliu, B, this was a modification done by the Japanese themselves to make it automatic, and C, the image was published in a book called US Small Arms of World War II by Brucie and Canfield, and was from the second volume. So, I then did what anyone would do and searched up the book, and I found there was a free ebook readable on Internet Archive. Hi, it's mid-editing Brucie here, with my awful audio quality, because I'm sat next to the world's loudest computer. So it turns out there was a pretty big catastrophic error in my research, because the book I found on Internet Archive is actually US Infantry Weapons of World War II, which is exactly not the book I wanted. There is a book called US Small Arms of World War II by Brucie and Canfield, which is the exact book I'm looking for, but I couldn't find a online version of it, so I'm probably going to order my own copy, read it, and find out what happened and what it actually says in the footnote. But yeah, no, so that's fun. So you can sort of ignore this part of the video with the book, because it doesn't really matter, but yeah, you know, just a slight oversight, you could say. So I read through it at the M1 carbine part and found nothing. After going through the whole book I had access to, I found nothing, which was frustrating. Although, I did find some useful information, like the M1 carbine had these kits to turn them into M2s in the field, and the US made more carbines than Garands. And, you know, this was pretty much all I found as a result of my very skilled research. It was here that I had an idea. OP mentioned that this was from the Battle of Peleliu, which means this image, most likely, is in other books about the battle. Here I had an idea to go through the Battle of Peleliu Wikipedia page and see what it said, since I assumed that it would have some good source links to start from, books and websites and the such. Well, I was wrong. I read the whole article, and although interesting, it provided no information. So, my next decision was to just search up Japanese M1 carbines, which didn't work either, because most of the results were about Japanese M1 carbines used by the post-war self-defense force, or unrelated posts about the Japanese Type 4 rifle. All I really managed to find was a British military surplus store selling 30-round magazines that said Japan in English, so I think it's safe to assume these are post-war M2 carbine magazines made for the self-defense force. So, finally, as a last-ditch effort, I decided to look again at the reverse image search. Outside of the countless enlisted forum posts and translations of the 1r/Forgotten Weapons post, I came to 2 links, one in Korean and a Twitter thread in Japanese. So I checked the Japanese Twitter thread first, finding that it just casually mentioned the M1 carbine and pointed out as a, hey, what a wacky gun, am I right? So that was fucking pointless. Also, if you're wondering, the thread was about the Type 100 and some field modifications, I think. I'm not sure how well the translation did. However, the Korean one was different. It mentioned that it was instead from Okinawa, which would be the evidence I was looking for if it was literally any other image that was the exact specifications of just a Japanese modified M1 carbine, because I'd absolutely believe there was some in Okinawa, considering, the nature of the whole battle. It was here, then, that I looked at the top of the page to see this. It was a fucking Korean Enlisted forum discussing the new update! Overall, I ended my search here, wanting to move on. All I had found was unrelated information, and very little that seemed to back this up outside of this image. It is possible that there is more evidence about these M1 carbines, and specifically I wanted to try and find some evidence from the Japanese perspective to see how often this was done, but considering that most of the Japanese at Peleliu died, I don't think I can get more info about it. So, that asks the question, what the hell was that about? Well, essentially to see if this tech gun tree was a modification, and according to my in-depth research, no, wasn't. The only recorded evidence was it being at the Battle of Peleliu, which we don't have on a map for, and it's only in one image. So brilliant. But don't worry, we sure didn't get the Pushka 41 with no suppressor, but we let this gun in, for some reason. I mean, I get it, Japan has no Tier 5 SMGs, I understand why people want it, but, it's just annoying. I mean, we could have finally had the 6.5mm Type 2 instead, but we get this bastard. Oh well. Let's just actually look at what the weapon's like, even. Well, I'm sorry to say I don't really like it. I can appreciate that people do, and I am happy that there is more to this reskin than it just being a reskin. It does feel like an actual new gun, which is more than I can say for some Japanese tech tree weapons. Cough. Often raw. Cough. So, yeah, this isn't the awful or worst decision that they could have, brought in for a tech tree tier 5 weapon. And it's not the worst. The weapon handles similarly to the Pushka Obrez and other similar high fire rate SMGs, but it has really one big problem that I despise. The sights. Now look, I get why they're like this. These are the sights of the M2 regular, but cut down. And I really don't think they work for the sawn-off, in my opinion, mainly because the rear aperture's too wide and open. Now this could be fixed. When you actually compare the M2 sawn-off to the Pushka Obrez for Germany specifically, they actually have a lot of similarities, including both lacking a front sight. However, this is less of a problem for the Pushka, since the rear sight is a lot tighter, which allows you to use it at a bit further ranges. Contrast that with the M2. It's less accurate, you need more guesswork, and it's just too wide of an aperture. The fix for this is to simply tighten the rear aperture, like the actual gun. I think this would actually allow the gun to be used at medium ranges and in more practical sort of combat situations where you'd want a carbine, because this shouldn't just have to act as a PDW in my opinion. They should also change the name to M1 Sawn-Off and give it the 15 round mags, but obviously keep the automatic capability because that's what the gun had. Overall, I think the M2 Sawn-Off, though, isn't the best. And really not the best tier 5 weapon they could have picked for Japan. Not only was it probably not used as much as we think, but there's a better replacement, because obviously we're delving into paper guns. The 6.5mm Type 2, which is also a Japanese design and not just a captured weapon. Personally, I think it would be a great decision, because it would finally add a gun that most people have been wanting for ages, and we could finally have assault engineers for both sides, and all sides would finally have them as well. I also didn't really like the hypocriticality of people ripping into the Papushka 41 Silenced for being historically inaccurate for the tech tree, which, in all fairness, it was, and people were right to be annoyed with it, but then to just blindly accept the M2 Sawn-Off. I mean, I get Japan doesn't have a huge amount of equipment you can pick from, but like, really? I mean, in my opinion, this gun is the worst tier 5 SMG, like, it's both inaccurate in historical terms and literal gun terms. Yeah, no, honestly, I don't like it. I don't think it's very good. I think there are better options, and the 6.5mm Type 2, which would have, hell, probably been easy to add, as they just have to port over, like, animations and stuff from the regular Type 2. But, you know, whatever. Instead, we got the historically dubious M2 carbine. Okay, so with the weapons I care about now out of the way, sorry planes, what do I think to the new map? Well, honestly, Walder's pretty good. It's a shame there's only 3 missions so far, but, like, that's not the end of the world, because I think all 3 missions are pretty good. Granted, the only one I actually got regularly was Invasion, followed by Confrontation, and finally the Conquest mode. But honestly, it's just, I think the best way to describe this map is kind of refreshing. You basically get this sense that this was a map designed for vehicles and infantry. Like, neither one feels too overpowered here. And I love all the stuff you get around here. Like, I thought the invasion was it was done really well. Like, as playing as a Soviets, you sort of start in this small village, which has this really big point in the middle. Then you get into a sort of uphill battle against pillboxes, where the usable anti-tank guns are, which is pretty cool. Then you get into the main town, where there's this really big church as the main point, which obviously that's really cool. And it's like a new church model as well, so that's even cooler. You get into this sort of gorge coming out on the way to an industrial area where the last point is, and I like that because it's some really interesting sort of vehicle combat and sort of forcing chokes, but it feels a lot better designed. But yeah, no, honestly, I think World is a good map. It's got that good balance, honestly. I think that's why I like it so much. It's got a really good balance. And the only problem is I wish it was in more missions. But yeah, no, it's a good map. It's nice to have something that goes sort of in between the Tier 3 Soviets. So yeah, no, good map, good game, good mission, good overall. Just good job, Wald. Good job. You're the best part of the update. Okay, so now on to the miscellaneous things, that being the new match picker and the brand new minus 20 XP penalty for deserters. We'll start with the match picker or match rater or this thing. Essentially, it's a tool that allows you to add a positive point or a negative point to get certain missions more often or more less. But I'll be honest, it's just it's another half-assed attempt. Like, it's nice to have some sort of way to have control over what matches we get into, but like, I think it just doesn't really work very well. I mean, I was using it to mainly get world games more often, and it really just seemed to not work very often. It very much was day to day. Like, even at peak times, sometimes it would work well, sometimes it wouldn't. It's not great. I think as well it also reveals how little variety there is in the missions. Obviously, it reveals most missions are all invasion. And yeah, it's not great. I think overall this would have been better if, once again, it was, you know, just a queue. I think it would be better if it just allowed us to queue for which game mode we wanted, because then it could also, I don't know, encourage the devs to add more game modes, but whatever. I think overall it's fine. It's not great, but I don't think it's exactly brilliant either. I mean, I'm probably only going to use it to just say, I don't want to play this match, or something like that. Anyway, now onto the thing that I really think is stupid, and that's the minus 20% XP penalty for desertion. Because, yay, it's another way to punish new players, and still lets desertions be a problem. Here's the thing, right? From my perspective, the majority of deserters are people who have unlocked and researched pretty much everything they want to the point where they don't need the XP. It's people like me, people who have finished trees of factions and just want to play the faction. Right? It's not necessarily for new players, because I don't think a lot of new players leave matches, and you can tell this because, well, I think the majority of deserters are people who are A, good at the game, and B, have most things unlocked. So all of this is doing is nothing. It's doing nothing. It's really ineffective, it's really stupid, and it's not really going to fix the problem. I mean, honestly, I'm surprised it wasn't a minus 20% silver modifier instead, but frankly, I don't want to give Darkflow any ideas, because that's even worse. Look, overall, these two changes are nice stepping stones, but these should not be the end goal. We need an actual mode that lets us not necessarily pick the maps we want to be on, but at the very least the modes, and we need to change desertion penalties, because this is just stupid. And, like, all this does is punish new players. Like, it's stupid, it's dumb, it's very silly, but I'm at least thankful they're aware of the problems and they're trying to do something. Okay, so that is Forest Shadows, and frankly, I think this update was kind of a letdown. I don't hate it, but, like, it's not the best we've had. The weapons felt kind of underwhelming, the new quality of life features either aren't really that useful or directly negative to new players, but hey, the map Wold is good, so 1 out of 3 isn't awful, that's 33%, I guess. With that said, I give Forest Shadows a 4 out of 10, or a 1 out of 3. A decent map with some pretty unexciting additions. Except for the M2 carbine sawn-off. Mark my words, I will have my revenge and find out how much that gun was used if it's the last thing I do. I mean, if I gotta fly out to Peleliu to, like, do that, then I will. Will. Mark my words. Anyway, with that all said, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.